Welcome back to Max Easy Lessons once more. Today we are going to look at Olive Senior's two grandmothers. It is a pleasure to have you here. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that red button if you like what you see, and to also check all the other videos that are here. If you're returning to my channel, as always, thank you so much for being here. Now, we're going quickly into this overview. The summary of The Two Grandmothers is very simple. The story opens with a little girl who is telling her mother about her experiences that she has had with her two grandmothers. One is Dell and one is Elaine, otherwise called Tozer. Now, Grandma Elaine is more of the town grandmother. She is more concerned with material things. She has had multiple marriages. She's a socialite who dates wealthy men. She travels, yes, and she is very concerned about her physical appearance. Now, Grandma Dell, on the other hand, is a country grandmother who lives in rural Jamaica. She raises animals, livestock, and she looks after her community. She also takes her granddaughter to church as well, and she is so wrapped up, so caught up, so in love with her granddaughter's pretty skin and hair that she's not afraid to show her to everyone that she knows. The granddaughter, at first, she prefers her country grandmother because, of course, she loves the attention that her country grandmother gives to her, and she wants her grandmother to show her off to her friends and neighbors. But as she gets older, what we realize is that the narrator no longer has that strong love for Grandma Dell. She transfers this love to Grandma Elaine, who she believes is more worldly, who is more of a cosmopolitan, who is more concerned with what is happening around her, and that was the kind of life she wanted as such. Now, the story is set in rural Jamaica, Kingston, and Clearwater in the USA, and it takes place at about sometime during the 1980s. Now, that was just the overview, the summary. Let's get straight into something else. Now, there are characters in the short story, sorry, that are important. There is Grandma Dell. She is traditional. She's old-fashioned. She has a Christian mind. She is simple because of how she sees things. Sorry, she's never married. She never has dates, and which is different from Grandma Elaine. She is prejudiced in many ways, yes, and some may say she is a hypocrite. Grandma Elaine, on the other hand, tells her is non-traditional. She's a socialite. She wants to get out there and have fun. She is what we would call a social butterfly. She's materialistic, yes. She's a narcissist. She has been married a number of times. She goes on dates, unlike Grandma Dell. She is prejudiced as well, yes. She is very straightforward, and she also speaks her mind. Now, the narrator, and this is a first person narration. The reader meets her when she is a little girl. That's the first glimpse we get of her. And then she grows and she matures as the story progresses, because this will tell us that time has passed. And by the end of the story, we realize that she is now a teenager. At first, and this is what I said in the summary, at first she preferred the company of Grandma Dell. But the more she matures, the more we realize as the readers that she shows a stronger preference to Grandma Tozer. She reports a lot of sensitive information. For example, she talks about the fall of Grandma Dell. She talks about Pearlie's home situation. She talks about Ermadine's and Eulali's pregnancies. And in many ways, we would realize that she does not appear to understand the problems that comes with her reporting all of these information. Now, as she grows older, she has become more materialistic in the things that she desires, and she wants to be like everybody else who is in a position to stand out. She appears by the end of the story to be quite confused in many ways about how to feel about the way she looks physically. She begins to appreciate her hip, socialite, social butterfly Grandma Elaine, and we see that coming out at the end of the story. The other thing we need to remember is that she cannot be bothered by her country grandmother anymore by the end of the story, because we realize that she has evolved into a more materialistic teenager. Now, the themes that are in the story, very simple themes. There is racial prejudice. We first see this in Grandma Elaine and the Clearwater relatives. We see that Grandma Elaine makes reference to the narrators here, and she says, your mother had better start to do something about your hair from now. It's almost as rough, as tough as your father's. And that would have told you that she has kinky black hair, and so the texture of the hair would not have been as soft as she would have wanted it to be. And Grandma Elaine continues and says, if you were my child, I would cut it off to get some of the kinks out. And that is one of the instances of racial prejudice that we meet in the story. Again, she talks about the skin tone. She says, Joyce says Grandma is sorry I came out dark because she is almost a white lady and I am really dark. The grandmother's preoccupation with the fact that her granddaughter is more black than she is white shows that strong element of racial discrimination against black. Now, the grandmother sees these features as flaws and passes this on to her grandchild, who eventually begins to question whether being of color is a bad thing. No, in contrast, that was Grandma Elaine there with her prejudiced self. In contrast, we meet Grandma Dell. Now, she is the one who reinforces the very opposite view of Grandma Elaine. For Grandma Dell, her grandchild's hair is beautiful. And the narrator makes reference to this when she says that her grandma Dell loves to comb her hair, and she says it's long and thick and she rubs it with castor oil, and that's a traditional West Indian thing. Well, she rubs it with castor oil every night because she thinks that this kinky hair, this black hair, is good. And she also believes, Grandma Dell also believes, that the narrator's skin is beautiful because Grandma Dell says, my skin is beautiful like honey. Now, despite this positive reinforcement that Grandma Dell brings to the table, there is still that clash between Grandma Elaine's idea of black is not being good and Grandma Dell's idea that this is a beautiful girl she is looking at. She too, like Grandma Elaine, Grandma Dell that is, like Grandma Elaine, believes that being too dark and having too much kink in one's hair is a bad thing. Now, the only difference with the two grandmothers is their idea of what is too dark or what is too kinky. But when we look at it, both of them had their level of racial prejudice that also added influence to the narrator growing up. The Clearwater relatives, and particularly Maureen, she emphasizes the theme of racial prejudice. She introduces the term nigger to the story. The narrator questions her beauty based on what she has seen as being beautiful around her. And she realizes that she does not have what it takes to be beautiful. And so she questions, how can I be beautiful when my skin is so dark, darker than yours and Marine's and Jason's and Auntie Rita's? And my hair is so coarse, not like yours or Marine's, but then Marine's father is white. Is that why Maureen called me a nigger? And this is what the narrator speaks to, because she knew within herself that that term was derogatory in many ways. And so she realizes then too that because of what Maureen said, and because Maureen lashed out in so many ways against being dark, she begins to hate Maureen based on the fact that Maureen said what she did. But ironically, even though she is against what Maureen says, we understand that she wants to be like Maureen, and she becomes even more ashamed of the hair that she has. There is also a social prejudice in the short story. We see this through Grandma Elaine, through Grandma Dell, and through the narrator. Grandma Elaine has a distinct dislike for Grandma Dell. Grandma Elaine believes that Granny Dell is from the country and therefore she is not worthy. She sees her as irrelevant, and she believes too that Grandma Dell is brainwashing their common granddaughter, the narrator, with information that is not only irrelevant, but that this information can be embarrassing as well. Now, her disgust, her disdain comes from the fact that Elaine is a socialite. Grandma Elaine is a socialite whose world centers on much of the simplistic life that which is in direct opposition, to the simple life that Grandma Dell leads. Grandma Elaine's life is fast-paced, and she believes in everything that takes her up the social ladder. Grandma Dell, on the other hand, is comfortable with just being a normal, simple person. Grandma Elaine, we see she dates rich white men, she travels, and she also makes sure that she maintains her beauty because the physical appearance, again, is very important to her. She sees Grandma Dell as beneath her, and so she scorns her in many ways. The readers will see that there is no ounce of Grandma Dell's feelings towards Grandma Elaine throughout the story, but we realize that the judgment she quietly gives out to her neighbors in the country. She sees Ermandine and Eulalie as disgraceful Jezebel lot who were dry-eyed because they have disgraced their parents by getting pregnant. She also sees them as being beneath her, despite the fact that she also did the same and she was also disregarded, shunned, embarrassed by the community for a period of time. Now, the narrator adopts the prejudices of both grandmothers because this is important. She gravitates towards both levels of prejudices, even though they were different. Each grandmother, in her own right, was prejudiced as well. And so the narrator starts to dislike going to the country because she begins to see that there is nobody but Black people there. And then she looks down on her friends, Eulalie, Pearlie, Ermandine, because of their multiple pregnancies and the fact that they were poor. She starts to literally avoid them because she does not want them to ask her for some of her clothes. Because having been around Grandma Elaine, she also has become materialistic in many ways. Everything about being in the country, in the rural area, we're talking about the experiences she's had. We're talking about the people that she has encountered or knows from her past. All of this begins to annoy her as she becomes a teenager. And she sees visiting the country as a shameful event. And she would have preferred to go to Europe or America. Now, this is not considered to be a socially relevant activity. Now, there is the other theme of love and family relationships. Both grandmothers, make no mistake, they may be prejudiced and they may have different thoughts on how she looks, but both grandmothers have a strong love for their grandchild. And of course, she loves them in return. Of course, she's probably confused as to what each grandmother stands for, but there is no doubt that she loves them in return. Grandma Dell will show her love and has shown her love throughout the story when she combs her granddaughter's hair, when she takes her to church, when she tries to get her to remove herself from the negative influences, and also by educating her about inappropriate behaviors and appropriate behaviors. At first, we realize that the narrator appreciates this education. She loves this education. She loves this attention that she receives from Grandma Dell. And as she grows, though, we realize that this changes, and she views this love as being irrelevant and to some point stifling. The narrator does not love her grandmother any less, though, and make no mistake, she still loves her, but she just cannot love the views of Grandma Dell anymore. In contrast, there is Grandma Elaine. She shows her love for her grandchild by highlighting her flaws, and she tries to improve these flaws, to fix them so that she becomes more socially acceptable. Therefore, Grandma Elaine is the one who points out that the narrator's hair is kinky and that her skin is too dark. Undoubtedly, this is a conversation you wouldn't have wanted to have with a child because that will impact her psychologically. However, this is her way of showing that she loves her. And as a result, that love intensifies in some ways because we realize that Grandma Elaine suggests activities for improving the narrator's social prospects. She wants to send her to a finishing school, and she wants her to visit off the island. And this would have made her more culturally aware. The narrator returns this love by eventually seeing Grandma Elaine as the favorite grandmother. And eventually, she adopts the materialistic ideals that Grandma Elaine holds. Now, there is also the theme of women in society. Now, the story of the two grandmothers is about women. It's about the values that women pass along, and it's about the way that women treat each other. Now, we meet different types of women of different social status and different financial backgrounds. But what we do understand is that all these women teach us about the overall picture of women in the society. Grandma Elaine, she is from a high social status, and she treats Grandma Dell, who is of a lower social status with disregard, disdain. Grandma Dell, on the other hand, treats Eulalie, Ermandine, and Pearlie with disdain because they are poor. and because they are the victims of their financial and social situations. The narrator, of course, is influenced by both grandparents, and so she joins the cycle of discriminating against her friends and those people, those experiences that she learned while living in the rural areas. And so she eventually begins to see herself as being better than them. And this feeling comes through Grandma Elaine, who teaches her that it is okay to be this way. Ironically, we see that she, the narrator, even though she has begun to feel herself better than the others who are not as well to do as Grandma Elaine, the narrator suffers the same treatment at the hands of her cousin Maureen. And this is ironic. And Maureen treats the narrator as less than well off. Now, the possible moral to this story is that women are supposed to be able to accept and understand each other for who they are and not for what they represent materialistically. Now, we have innocence and the loss of innocence. As a child, the narrator reports the actions of others without understanding the damage that she can do. She's innocent. Her words are innocent, but the feelings of others would have been hurt. And so we see that as a child, she is innocent. She accepts people at one point as a child for who they are. And of course, she sees the good in these people. Now we see that through the admiration that she has for Eulalie's skill in the kitchen. We also see that in her acceptance of Ermandine and Pearlie's babies. She simply just accepts them because she is innocent. But she loses that innocence as she grows older and is more influenced by Grandma Elaine's actions and thoughts. And so we see that with the loss of innocence, she begins to see herself differently. She thinks that she is better than her friends because of their social status. And this is because her circumstances have changed. She has begun to live a life that is no longer connected to being in the country or being in the rural area. And it is at this point that we realize that she has lost the innocence that comes with maturity. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you stuck around. I know it was a little bit long. I never intended it to be this long, but thank you so much for watching. And don't forget, subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel. Click on that bell notification so that you will see more of these coming about. Thank you so much for watching.